What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode 372. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and just like in every episode, I'm joined by
Ron.
And John, the guy who needs non-reflective lenses if he's going to wear his
I was like,
readers.
yeah, that's a good looking.
That's distracting, isn't it? I can do this. And
wear them on the tip of your nose, Grandma.
Right. It's
yeah,
like,
so I'm computer eyes.
I'm trying it the whole episode. I'm going to be trying to read what's on your screen through your
He's like,
lenses.
well,
Like, what is John?
You'll be able to tell when I
right
click
now?
off of the zoom. You're like, oh, he's just raising his email now.
Yeah. I see the squares.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. We have this week's pick for required viewing was John's pick from last week, which is a new leaf, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And then the real feature episodes for this week's episode of the podcast are going to be for Ben Affleck. His has a new film out this week called Air, or actually it comes out next week, but we're allowed to talk about it a little early because embargo's open on that because it premiered at South by Southwest. And then we're also going to be talking about Taron Egerton's new film, which is on Apple TV Plus today, called Tetris. And then I'm sure we have some little sprinkles towards the end that we'll mention as well. But let's get into this week's required viewing. John, remind us about your pick and let's talk about it.
Well, I picked a movie, a comedy from 1971 that I had heard about for years and was kind of a blind spot for me as a fan of both writer-director and co-star Elaine May, and a big fan of Walter Matthau, who's like one of those actors that you might just think I'm just going to do a Matthau watch. You know, you might just pick his movie. He's like if he was working today in this prime that we see him in this movie, I think he would be one of those actors that we talk about like, oh, what's his next thing going to be? And he's just a reliable guy. And, I knew that this movie had some things about it that were a little broad and also a little bit it's a bantery comedy with a lot of, funny dialogue, which we kind of expect from Elaine May, because that's sort of how she cut her teeth getting into the business. She and Mike Nichols were a highly influential comedy team. And it was very much two-hander, sketches that they would do together. That were built around this very funny repartee. So there's like a lot of absurd humor in her stuff, and also as an Ishtar apologist, that's her writer and director effort as well, writing and directing effort. That is like a famous failure because of how much it cost. Not necessarily the movie itself, although the movie is like awkward in some ways, but like I think that she's just a person who has a particular brand of humor, and like the first 10-15 minutes of Ishtar is some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen, and that's where her humor shines in that. But she's just another kind of comedic voice that, because of her slightly excessive and mysterious ways, she hasn't made a lot of movies. She's only directed a few movies over all these years, but she pops up in odd places, and she's always very funny. And yeah, I knew this was supposed to be one of those 70s movies that had a lot of character and kind of felt modern, maybe to a modern audience in some ways, in terms of the things it's getting at. I felt a little bit of like Wes Anderson in this. In different directors. I was like, some people definitely have watched this movie. But yeah, so for me, it was, like I said, a little bit of a blind spot, and I thought it would be fun after the incredible bleakness of our last movie that we watched, which was that Palm Trees and Power Lines. It would be fun to watch something that was perhaps funny and light. And I didn't know how dark this movie was going to be, but I was sort of pleased that it had a sweet heart, to be found within it, even though it does start off as this incredibly vicious character portrait of this useless man, this completely useless trust fund baby who has mismanaged his life. But yeah, I guess I would throw it to you guys, since all of us have seen this for the first time, I think, in this viewing. What did this movie, was this on your radar at all, and what did you think of it, Ronald?
Yeah, I never heard of it. I like Walter Matthau. I think about him, the grandpa or gramps,
Grumpy Old Man.
Grumpy Old Man. He really made me happy watching those movies, and Dennis the Menace was so good in that. So I hadn't really seen a bunch of his older movies, so I was excited to see him as a young man, because he's like what's his name?
He's like 50 something in this movie.
Yeah,
but he also was a guy who always looked 50 something.
Yeah,
I feel like when he was 10, he probably looked 50.
He's a white Morgan Freeman. And that if you look at Morgan Freeman when he was supposed to be young, you're like, he was like clearly 45 at this point when he was supposed to be 20. But But yeah, I was very excited to see it, and he came through, man. Like these comedy notes that he was kind of expecting, he did a little more than that. He had a lot of like range, and he apparently does a bunch of voices. Like the voices that he was doing kind of surprised me as well. But it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar boat. Like I think I maybe had heard about this movie only because of Elaine May and the stars of the movie, and it kind of being a movie that I feel like I've seen on some lists of like comedies that you need to see that are like all time type things, but I'd never seen it, and yeah, I feel like the same way. I don't know that I've ever like taken a dive into the like 70s era Mathau, even 80s stuff. Like I don't really think I've seen many of those movies outside of, I don't know, like The Odd Couple or something like that. But yeah, my generation or my exposure during my growing up, it was more of the stuff that came out in the 90s, things like a lot of the Jack Lemmon stuff, the Grumpy Old Man, Grumpy You're Out to Sea, like those comedies that came out when he was, he was probably, what I guess, in his 70s or so at that point, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I always like really liked him. And I remember my grandfather always thought he was really great and funny. And any exposure that I had to any of those older films were definitely through my grandparents. But yeah, I mean, I kind of, it's funny you said the Wes Anderson thing, because like he's kind of come up this week a few times and talking about like the trailer for his new film, Asteroid City, which I think looks great. And I also got a little bit of that vibe from this movie too. I kind of was thinking about that during the movie. But yeah, I thought it was really good. I mean, it feels, not to say like, not to be cliche about it, but I know one of her other films, I think it was Heartbreak Kid or one of them, like it got a remake, this movie feels like it's wherever you fall on that idea, like kind of prime for a remake. I feel like this movie like is pretty relevant today, and even some of the
the
themes,
commentary on a profoundly useless rich person, I feel like
yes,
today we're gonna have a
exactly.
special cutting quality to it, because this guy is just like crashing into the real world. He never really has to, but there's that moment when he comes out at the beginning and he hits the street and he just, I'm poor.
Yeah, yeah.
He's going around saying goodbye to all the
I
like
love
affectations of a rich person's life. I thought that was really funny.
I just feel like that disconnectedness, like that the scene with the banker is probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Oh, that was great.
Just like how that banker's like, he's like, like the capital, the money, the cash.
Yeah.
How else can I say this? Oh no, that's everything I can say. Like I actually rewound it and watched that scene a couple times.
Really
like
good.
That scene was so good, and Mathau was incredible in that. Just like how just out of touch he is with the concept of what's being like something
that he's run out of money.
You have
accountant or his financial lawyer, whatever that guy was, is telling him you're basically out of money, but he's being so gently condescending about it. And Steve, it's funny that you mentioned like a remake, Steve, because in my mind I was like, who does this guy remind me of? And I think it's John Hodgman. I think that I could see John Hodgman playing that part of just really dry, very like gently sarcastic, but just kind of relishing this moment to tell this guy what you think before he's gone from your life forever, maybe.
Yes.
But the way he told him, like, I only helped you this far so that I could tell myself that it was,
that I did everything.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, so this guy's out of money and he picks this woman that he's going to marry. And very quickly, I just loved how he's so useless. Very quickly, he goes to, I have to murder someone for their money. Like, there's no chance that he's just going to get a job. And I think, I mean, we're talking a lot about Walter Matthau because it's definitely that character's movie.
Yeah.
But Elaine May even played the character of Henrietta out of wanting, she said, because the studio wanted Carol Channing. And Elaine May said, no, we need someone who's going to disappear. It's about the man overpowering this woman in a way. Right. So we need a woman who kind of disappears. And I think she nailed the tone. I mean, there was something about Henrietta that I never felt fully sorry for because she was such a quirky individual. And I think that it helps. The movie could seem kind of mean-spirited, I think, if Elaine May didn't bring a certain sort of her own kind of obliviousness to Henrietta, know? But also that she's really smart, and I think that that's something that comes through, and that might be what kind of wins him over to the extent that he gets won over by her, is the fact that she's smart and she's a person who has even if small accomplishment that she has in this film, but at least she accomplishes something, which is something he's never done. I thought that was just kind of a funny turn of events.
Yeah, no, I mean, if anything, I feel like if anything seems a little, it's kind of subtle in terms of like how, this forced marriage or this rushed marriage for his benefit, like ends up actually benefiting him in ways that is beyond money. Like I like the idea of like when he gets into her world, he sees like, how much she's being taken advantage of beyond just the fact that he's taking advantage of her the most out of anybody, and he's like trying to help in ways that he can't even
He's like,
help
don't
himself.
drain her money. I need that money.
Right.
But then it kind of turns into something else. Right.
And yeah, it turns into a quote unquote lesson for him, so that all kind of how that ramps up, I thought was pretty fun. And yeah, I don't know. I like the moment, like, when they're in the river and he kind of sees the fern, and like it's like that, like something clicks, it's like, oh, I care about this fern, so I care about this woman. I don't know. That all worked pretty well for me. I mean, again, I don't really have much awareness of a lot of the cast in this movie. I mean, beyond like the stars that they are, especially Mathau, but seeing some other faces pop up of people that I recognize.
Doris Roberts from Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah,
did you see Philip Drummond there? He was in one scene.
Really?
Mr. Drummond from Different Strokes was.
Yeah. I was saying in the background at the wedding, right?
Yeah,
I think so. I think that's where he was.
Yeah, I think I saw him in there too.
And James
Coco, this is like a fun movie, man.
Was great. I love the uncle scene where he's just this kind of like gluttonous guy the whole time, but you could tell he too, like the lawyer, is sort of taking pleasure in this guy's downfall. One other thing I just wanted to mention, just from a filmmaking standpoint, before we move on from this, is that the way that Elaine May made her movies, frequently the reason that she ran over budget, because this movie was budgeted at like 1.8 million and supposedly went up to 4 million. It made 5, so it wasn't a flop, but she just shoots and shoots and shoots and shoots, and then kind of finds it in the edit. And there was originally like an hour longer version of this that supposedly did get into like murders and characters dying and stuff. And the studio
and like him killing people for her, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
You can see I've read an article about like how he had poisoned 2 people.
Yeah,
because there's scenes in there where he's reading about like poisons,
right?
And like he ends up like killing 2 people. Like,
well, you can picture the people that he could kill. Like I think her lawyer who had a crush on her felt like he's a prime candidate for getting killed, and one of those workers from her house that he gets rid of seems like they would be too.
Exactly.
But either way, it like supposedly the studio took it away and edited it down, and everybody at the studio was really happy with it. But Elaine May was sort of shut out and has never really, I don't know if she ever has acknowledged the film. She's always said that her version would be better, but I think that's interesting that someone would shoot a comedy and overshoot like that. And, Judd Apatow is someone who's put out like a 2.5 hour comedy that you think, this could have been tightened up a little. But I do think it's interesting to think the tone of this movie could have been so different. And it's that rare case, a lot of critics even said this, where you might side with the studio taking somebody's movie away because this movie doesn't feel like it needs another hour, and it doesn't feel like it needs a lot of dark stuff to complicate the very dark idea already that this guy's first thought is, let me find somebody to kill. Anyway, I was happy to have finally kind of crossed this off the list, and it got me thinking about that Walter Matthau. There's definitely some, Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. There's some things like that I think would be fun movies to revisit. So I might dive into some Matthau Town.
Cool.
Matthau Town. That's the channel, and that should be one of the rows in like Netflix or whatever.
It's the jowliest town in the world.
Yeah,
so the most hangdog town that ever there was.
I was just want to mention real quick for anybody that if you didn't get to watch this pick with us for this episode and you want to watch it, just as a reminder, I watched it on Pluto TV. It's on there for free. Pluto TV is entirely free. There are ads. They're pretty brief. It doesn't feel pretty. I did not feel disruptive to me. But if you want to check it out for free, it is on. It's on Pluto TV.
The version I saw, I believe, was remastered. It was really looked great. I don't know what. I mean, this is a 1970s movie, and it definitely still had the graininess and the kind of, that kind of hacked together quality of the film that I was suggesting it might have from the way that she shoots movies.
Mm-hmm.
But it did, it looked really, really good too. So I think that, there's an opportunity to really enjoy the way this looks. I don't know if it looks good on, you said Pluto?
It looked great on Pluto.
Okay,
yeah, it was.
Cool.
I don't know what version it is, but it looked really good.
I'm glad they're using. I would think that they would not be using like the best versions of stuff, but it seems like they whenever I've watched something on there, it usually has been up to the resolution I would want, because I'm somewhat picky about that on my big television. I'll watch something on my computer that's not high res, but on the television, I don't really want to watch a movie and not enjoy the way it looks. So Pluto's a great option. It just adds 20 minutes maybe to your view time because of the commercials.
Not even that, man. Like I think each commercial is only like barely 30 seconds. And there was only like maybe 6 or 7, I feel like, that really paid attention to. It was very brief. It was not. They
probably put more in properties that are more highly regarded. So maybe if
I'm sure
it's kind of deep catalog like this. Anyway, so whose turn is it? Ronald? Is it your pick next?
Ronald. Yep.
Yes.
Where are you going to take it?
Um,
Mathau Town or somewhere else?
I'm gonna take you guys to India.
Ooh.
Fresh off of the RRR buzz, I've been hearing about this movie. People have been talking about fucking mad, and then I hear that it came to Amazon Prime. It is 2023's Pathaan. It is a combination, like, heightened action, has some singing in it, but fresh off of RRR, this is supposed to be one of those ones that isn't rooted in anything quite as historical or political, but still has kind of the feel of the action. Pathaan, it's spelled Pathaan. It is on Amazon Prime, and I think they have like the director's cut on there, which incentivizes people seeing it on there as opposed to like maybe buying it on iTunes or renting it on iTunes. But I've heard incredible things about it. All my like real movie nerd friends that are into action have been bringing it up a ton, and I'm like, I'm kind of like you guys. I'm making an excuse to kind of put this in the middle of everything to watch it. And
That's cool.
I didn't quite get to catch RRR, but this feels like a little more my speed. Since it's not like historical. No offense to history, but something a little more light. You know what I mean?
Take note, listeners. Take note, listeners.
I would think
Ronald
that,
is anti-history.
I would think
So
that RRR would be historical in a way that is it's so not. I mean, I think it's so heightened, and I don't think it would hit those period movie things that you don't like. You know what I mean, Ronald? I know some of your. I don't always know exactly what you mean, but I'm just saying in this case, I've heard you talk about period pieces and how they leave you cold sometimes. I feel like RRR doesn't really feel like a period. Like there's moments of
it doesn't.
where it doesn't, where it almost feels like a Baz Luhrmann movie or something like that, where it's like it's kind of abandoning like a strict period piece feel. But anyway, so yes, that's awesome. I love this mix we're getting with these.
Yeah, man, I'm excited about it. I've literally, like, my friends have literally, it's one of the things I've seen outside of the mainstream releases. I've seen it like 4 times in the last like 3 days or so. So I'm like, well, I'll give that Pathaan a pass. Let's see what this is about. Let's put it through the ringers. And it's 2.5 hours. That's a lot, but it'll be nice. And it apparently sounds incredible. So that's another cool reason to watch.
Cool.
All right, go.
I'll have to listen to it as well as watch it.
Yeah. Like, what you. All right. So
let's move on to, I guess let's talk Air, because it's kind of the not in theaters this weekend, but this is more of a heads up of a movie coming out next week. Comes out on April 5th, which is a Wednesday release, holiday week. This is the new film from Ben Affleck, starring Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Viola Davis, Jason Bateman, Chris Messina, Jay Moore. It's a bunch of Chris Tucker, Marlon Wayans. I don't know, just a really great cast. But this is just basically the story of the deal between Nike or the efforts for Nike to sign Michael Jordan to a shoe contract, and establish and really kind of set the mark for what their basketball division would be and the brand of the company in general would be in the years and decades to come. But this is a film that, again, April 5th, it hits theaters. Before we even talk about the movie, I just wanted to mention quickly that it is an interesting topic of conversation, because this is a movie that is getting a standard theatrical release. I mentioned April 5th in theaters everywhere, wide. And it's coming out from Amazon. So Amazon, obviously the streaming platform, among many other things, but it's unique in the sense that they are going with a wide release for a movie that will eventually be on their streaming platform. It will be on Amazon Prime Video, but it's getting like an exclusive theatrical window. And it's important or interesting because, I think they're kind of trying to set a standard of what it can look like for these streamers to play nice with theatrical, for these movies to have a chance to make money in a theater, to market themselves past the theater over to the streaming platform, if it is a hit, and kind of set a precedent for things like what Apple TV, or Apple in general, I'm sorry, announced recently with some of their original titles like Killers of the Flower Moon. They said they're going to do the similar thing with later this year, and I'm sure many other movies. But This is kind of one of the first ones that they're kind of doing this with, where it's going to be in the theater for a protected period of time. I don't know the exact days, but I think I've read somewhere between 30 and 45. Um, and then it'll be on Amazon Prime. But I'm sure that's kind of the prime window for a movie to make its money, especially a movie like this. Even though I do think that a movie like this could really develop a word of mouth, and kind of stay in theaters for a little bit. But just as a point, because we talk about streaming all the time, we talk about what this theatrical world looks like now. This is a unique release. This is a movie again that Amazon's marketing as a movie that will be on Prime, but everything that you see right now says see it in theaters. It's theatrical. Right. It's only in theaters April 5th. But then on May, whatever, it'll be on your box at home and you can watch it for the first time or again. But spoiler alert, I think we'd all probably say go see this movie in theaters if it interests you at all. John, what did you think of Air? Why don't you kick it off?
I mean, I am not a sports guy. I am not. I mean, I like shoes, but I'm not necessarily like deep into my son's into Nikes and Air Jordans, and so I have I have had a couple of those retro reissues around my house, and I've been able to kind of look at that shoe and think about the design of it. But I come into this movie very cold in that sense, not cold like turned off to it, but I come into this movie not and I also think even in this movie, as much as I can see that it's earned and it's a big part of what this movie's trying to grapple with, that sort of hero worship of Michael Jordan also always kind of makes me go, it's like people give into it a little too much, like when the sappy music kicks in and we're just talking about how great the guy is. But I understand how important he was and how he really was one of those once in a lifetime performers, artists, athletes, whatever you want to call these people who become larger than life. So I came into this going, this movie doesn't have to like do a lot to make me like it, but it did have to have something going for it other than the story of Nike or the story of Michael Jordan or whatever. I didn't know quite what mix we were going to get, and
sure.
and what I liked and in some moments really loved about this movie was that it had these very old-fashioned attributes as a movie, like good acting, good dialogue, scenes that are allowed to play out between characters, and a lot of two-person scenes where you just get to live and breathe in the characters' world for a minute. And it did one other thing that I really love for this type of movie is it's what we talked about coming out of it, is it focused on the thing that it's about. It didn't try to spin out and go into everybody's backstory and everybody's personal lives, and it didn't lose its focus on the deal that was made between Nike and Michael Jordan or his family to put his name on a shoe and to design a shoe for him. Like these two things working together to help each other. And then at the end of the movie, the numbers that they throw up on the screen make you realize why this is interesting and important, even if you're not into sports, even if you're not into shoes. The fact that this is a $4 billion a year industry business, that this shoe line is insane. And also it's it makes it fruitful for this type of movie to say like, well, what was that decision making process like? So I really enjoyed the just the time spent watching actors act opposite each other when the stakes aren't super high. This whole thing about a shoe, but so it's a little bit life or death career stuff for some of these characters. It feels like there's stakes, but it didn't overblow that stuff either. It just really made it about the deal, and you got to appreciate the sort of, there's a little bit of that when someone does a period piece thing and they have people saying, well, that'll never catch on, and it's something that we all know caught on, but that's at a minimum. It's mostly about like the kind of, it's like, dare I say it, like the process or the creative process or whatever that is, this process. I guess it's a creative process when a shoe company approaches a sports star, I thought it was interesting. Right. I love movies that dig into a process like that. It's like watching a heist film or something like that, where it's all about watching people come up with a plan and then execute it, So I really enjoyed the heck out of it, if it's not obvious.
Yeah, no. What about you?
I thought Chris Messina was insanely great. Like he may have been the guy who stole the movie in some ways.
Well, the one thing I'll say is shorthand. That's the first thing that comes to my head. This feels like this was done with a very shorthand. For context, by force, I was a sports fan. My dad was obsessed with sports. He had like a encyclopedic memory of things. I've seen Michael Jordan play twice. Once with when the Bullets DC was Washington Bullets. I and then we stayed to watch him walk out, and I screamed his name. And then Wizards, when he had come back, I screamed his name in the crowd, and he turned around and looked at me,
Hey,
I
kid.
guess, to say something, and I didn't say anything. And he's just like, "The fuck did you?" He's yelling at me like that for it. It's really, really crazy. I have
Why'd you get my attention if you have nothing
countless
to say?
Yeah, congrats, you know
pairs,
my name.
countless pairs of Jordans. But the reason why he's so important is he's one of the few people whose persona, the shroud of like mystery and greatness really matched up. It's one of the few things where you could hear about how great a person was. You're like, he's not that great. And then watch him play, and then he exceeds that, and then he hangs in the air for a couple more seconds than you expect him to. But what I did like about this movie, that it didn't focus on that so much as the cultural impact, which is really cool, which is like a man who sees greatness in another man, who sees like, I don't want to give it away, but the scene where he realizes why he was so great is some of the conversations I would have with my dad growing up, where he'd say like, he sees this play before he's coming down. Like he read the play already. I'm like, what? And then he goes, whoa, 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 and then dunks on him. I'm like, oh, what the fuck was that? He's like, if you paid attention, his body went that way, but his eyes went that. I was just like, oh my God. So, you see obsessive in that. And even if I don't understand that, I understand passion. And that's one of the things that I gravitate towards. Like, I don't ever have to understand what it is that you are passionate about, but the emotion, the feelings, seeing a man who believed in another person or an idea and sacrificed is what I remember feeling the first time I went on stage, the first time I ever heard something I made before or saw something I did before. And like, oh man, that's a tangible thing. You guys make music. So you made something, you're like, oh my God, like from your brain to it coming out, it's just like, it's sorcery. It's magic. It's a magic that not everybody's able to access. So, they say that's rare air, So when you see somebody that sees that in another person, and he might be the Michael Jordan of recruiting, that's weird that becomes a term. That's the Michael Jordan of the Michael Jordan. You even say it about good things and bad things, which is even crazier. The cultural zeitgeist that he's in is just incredible. And this movie does a really good job, without even shoving his image down our throat, of helping us understand, the business of it, because it is a business, and there are some things that are used to manipulate you. I remember watching that commercial when Michael Jordan dunked and everybody stopped and people's milk fell down. And you remember that, like that iconic commercial? That's how we all felt. But in order to do that, somebody has to see that in another person. Last thing I'm going to say. I remember when I worked at Under Armour, they picked up this scrawny little kid from Stevenson named Stephen Curry. And I remember when they threw his name around, there are people like, who the fuck is Stephen Curry? What is he gonna do? I don't understand why we're just picking random dudes that Golden State Warriors, and then he made shots without looking at the basketball.
Well, don't you think they're commenting on that, Ronald, with the guy at the guy who works at the convenience store, who's a friendly guy and seems like he keeps up with sports, but what he says about Michael Jordan at first is like, no one's worth that, it's never going to be. And then later he's like, we always knew, you know what I mean? But it's like, I'm not being a sports fan. I can tell that that's part of the fun of it, sort of.
For sure.
A lot of predicting and being wrong, and then embracing somebody that you used to hate because they did something awesome, or they different team or whatever, different times. So I think that it does tap into that. But don't you think it's interesting, Ronald, that like this movie doesn't delve into the fans, the sports, you know what I mean? The
Yeah,
drama is
yeah,
almost entirely like behind the scenes in this very specific way that is like, now you just
yeah,
take it for granted that this kind of deal gets made. But this was like, yeah, you were talking about the Michael Jordan of sports scouting or whatever, but I mean, we're supposed to, they mentioned several times in this movie that Matt Damon's character is a kind of a visionary in what he's doing. Like, what
yeah.
was he someone you were aware of as part of the Michael Jordan myth before this? Was that someone who you had thought a lot about? Like, and
For
you know,
sure.
did it seem like a movie was due about this person? Because that was the other thing I kept thinking was like, does this really warrant a movie? By the time I
Yeah,
got to the end, I was like, yeah, it does.
yeah.
But I
There's,
didn't know if going into it, if you had more of an understanding of like the personalities behind it.
I forget the name of the documentary, but there's a documentary about how he basically invaded high school and college sports and put a Nike shoe on everybody's foot. So, like, you know,
Which
performance
they
is
showed.
synonymous with Nike after a while. You're like, oh God, like if this high school kid has it and this person has it, they just gave them away. And then eventually, you know, have Nike games and things like that, to the point where like it's so special now to hear Nike and somebody being chosen to be a Nike athlete, that it's like a torch being passed on to somebody. It's like the baton being passed. Do you remember
That,
the
but
name of
that's
that
even like, I don't know. I know the one you're talking about. I think I've actually
Yeah,
seen that
yeah.
documentary. It's not a 30 for 30, is it?
It might be. I think it might be.
It might be. I think I don't know.
I
It
think it might.
definitely sounds familiar. But I don't know. I feel like the interesting part, like what you're talking about right now, like in terms of, well, specifically with Nike, you know, like there's a lot of discussion in the movie about Nike's inability to like kind of break into basketball, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in terms of sponsorships or licensing or any kind of like endorsement deal. And I think the movie does a really great job in kind of framing like Nike's history, like
Yeah,
how much it
for
took
sure.
for Nike to get where it was, and really what Nike's bread and butter was versus something like Adidas or like, you know, what the culture was really going after at the time. And even the scene with Chris Tucker where he's explaining why, you know, Adidas is what it is and like
Yeah,
why the young players coming into the league want to be with Adidas because like, it's beyond the sport, you know, like
yeah,
it's a music thing, it's a culture thing, it's like it's a part of the you know the youth, quote unquote, of the time. But I think the movie does a really great job of that in terms of how Sonny, Matt Damon's character, really played a part in, you know, forcing Nike to not just be Nike, you
yeah,
know, to
yeah,
not really kind of do what Phil Knight seemed to be wanting to do, or even Rob, like a lot of the executives were kind of like, I don't want to say they were satisfied because obviously they were trying to find new draft picks. They were looking at, you know, picks 5 through 20. And like, you know, they had that
yeah,
whole scene where they're randomly picking who they think they can get. But I think that was a really interesting part of the story, which is just that not only is Sonny a part of getting Michael Jordan to Nike, but he's also a part of getting Nike outside of a comfort zone that
100%.
maybe would have never allowed Nike to become the Nike that it was in our teens and even what it is now to, you know, a team like John's son. You know, it's like it really became above and beyond what I think they probably ever thought it could be. And the irony in it all is that, you know, a big part of this movie, and I think what John mentioned earlier on about like this idea of like it's not a biopic, but it's like telling a very specific part of a person's story, of a business's story, of a sports history story. You know, it's very focused on this one event, but the one event has a bunch of different layers to it in terms of how it affected the sport, the culture, the business.
Yeah,
And I love the idea of like how much emphasis there is, and it's kind of like a I like how it kind of comes in last minute and almost blows the whole thing up, but just this idea about, you know, an athlete or somebody being sponsored or endorsed getting a share of every shoe that is
yeah,
sold, that their name or their eventually their likeness is on when they change the Air Jordan logo in the years to come. You know, that that whole concept is kind of received as just like silly, you know, even to Sonny. It's like, I get what
yeah.
you're saying, but that's just not how it works. Um, so I love that stuff in the movie. And I think that's all done so well. And the scene with him and her on the phone discussing the value of that is a
Oh,
great sequence. And it's shot really nicely, like kind of bouncing back and forth between like their visual and physical, like, you know, how uncomfortable he is even trying to explain why it's not that way.
Yeah.
I thought was really good. But that piece of it, it really kind of comes in at the end as a gotcha moment because, like, it's like that if you know the story at all, and you know what the precedent is in today's world. But at that time, to see how that idea was received, even after going after someone that you deem to be the greatest, player there ever will be, or whatever, superlative he placed on Michael Jordan. But yeah, I don't know. I love this movie. I think the acting and the performances are great. I think Matt Damon is probably better than he's been and stuff that I've seen him in a long time.
Great to see him
in the
man.
movie. He's got a really great monologue in the sequence, like when they're kind of pitching Jordan and his family on signing with Nike, that I kind of feel like will probably catch on and be quoted, or become part of meme culture or whatever. It's got a lot of good one-liners in it, but Jason Bateman's great. Ben Affleck's really good in it, and I said it to you guys after the movie, like I hope Ben Affleck just keeps directing stuff too. Like I really think he's a really great director, and with them having their own production company now, I hope that is a part of what he does, is like developing and making more movies that they can be a part of, and kind of give people a chance on. But I this is a definite recommend for me. This is one of my favorite movies of the year so far. I definitely plan on trying to take Erin to see this movie in theaters because she really was interested in seeing it, based on the trailers, which are pretty good trailers, I think. But
the Sonny Vaccaro 30 for 30 is called The Soul Man.
Right, right. That's it.
Yeah,
yep.
Soul Man.
I thought it was a 30 for 30, but yeah, it's
you're right.
really
it's a 30
good.
for 30. Yeah.
Yep.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Apparently, he just did an interview like not too long ago, like 2 days ago. Did well.
Oh, because of the movie, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
83 years old.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this will be in theaters for at least a month or so. So you have an opportunity to check it out if it sounds interesting. If not, you can wait it out and it'll be on Amazon Prime eventually. Cool. But again, it's called Air and it comes out next Wednesday if you're listening to this on the day we release this, but that's April 5th release. Ronald, why don't you tell us about Tetris a little bit?
Okay. So Tetris is a film by Apple Studios about the gentleman John Hank. Am I getting his name wrong? I feel like I always fuck names up.
It's Hank something. Hank. Oh God,
it's about the gentleman that brought Tetris to the States.
It's Hank Rogers.
Hank Rogers. Because they say Mr. Rogers. I knew that because I noticed that every time they say Mr. Rogers. So maybe Mr. Rogers.
Hank Henk, not ANK.
Yes, yes. It's about a gentleman that brought Tetris as we know it to the States and basically worked on the mass distribution of this. And then, for those who are like historians, gaming historians, or existed back then, the way that I remember it being distributed was the Game Boy. That was the way that people had it. I mean, like it's although the first time I ever saw it, my dad had it on he worked for the state and had these big storage discs. They were like the size of a MacBook Pro. They were about this size, and Tetris and Qbert were on there. And I could not believe what I was playing. It was before I actually saw it everywhere. And it made me realize that things were distributed a little differently than I thought. I thought that, like, when I think about the internet, I think about how quickly people could get things, but there were ways that things got across the world outside of the internet back in the day. But it's about this journey to get this game distributed without any bloodshed. And there seemed to be a lot of hyper violence to get to this game because people knew the value of it. What's
the irony? I feel like eventually they realized the value. Like in some cases they obviously didn't know it
for sure
early on, and then it became a whole game of who could get it first. But you're right. Yeah, I feel like I remember playing it on the Game Boy as well. I feel like, and that's kind of like, that's really the third act of this movie. It's the big focus and really what Hank Rogers, my awareness of him was like, that's a lot of what his contribution or what they, kind of give him credit for was kind of negotiating that whole Game Boy deal, or like the whole handheld deal
for sure.
for Nintendo for, this game and, just what he did with Nintendo past that. But, he ends up becoming like the guy who runs the Tetris Corporation,
Yeah.
with the Lexi, who's the creator of the game. But the movie is kind of like, it's another kind of like, how did this happen? This kind of cultural moment of like a gaming system, and even for a company like Nintendo to like package a Game Boy with Tetris over Mario was kind of crazy at the time, but that was like where they saw this game going. And the appeal of this game was, it seemed, and maybe in some ways is broader than Mario. But I mean, that's a matter of opinion, I guess. But the movie just kind of focuses on the idea of like how this game was created briefly, but then more importantly, the game itself around getting the rights to distribute this game, and how the game changes over time a little bit. Which I like that scene in the movie, like when he kind of meets, or he kind of befriends Alexi a little more, and like is at his home, and they're kind of looking at the coding,
very modest circumstances in which he created this game, and then they make some changes to it.
And you kind of get lost on the fact that like Hank is a programmer himself, and he's done this himself, but he's really a businessman because he owns this company. But when he has a moment with this guy who created this game that he loves and thinks is super valuable, it's like he makes a suggestion that makes the game better, and they kind of fix that in real time. It's kind of a cool moment, and that's something that prior to that I didn't even really notice, that when they're playing the game in the movie, that like only one line is disappearing at a time when you line up the blocks, which is kind of wild to think about that iteration. But I like this movie. Like I feel like it's a little more, I don't know, I don't want to say silly, or it's a little more heightened. It's got this like espionage, like spy, like adventure vibe to it, when he they're going across the globe trying to get these rights, and people fighting over who signed what contract for what amount of money. But I think Taron Egerton's a really good actor. I think he's kind of had a couple really great performances over the past. Like Blackbird was really that series that he had with Paul Walter Hauser on Apple TV Plus was great last year, I thought. And if anything, I feel like he looks a little too buff still in this movie, but it distracted me a little bit.
I didn't quite buy him as this guy. I bought him as the heightened version of the guy that you're talking about. But I will say this. I mean, you were talking about it being kind of heightened. I will say that would be like, I would say the thing that kind of kept me out of this movie for the most part was, whereas in Air, I was becoming more aware as it went along of why this deserves a movie, and why focus on these guys. It's like, I kept thinking in this movie, like I honestly, I think it starts off wrong or something. It like starts off with this insanely heightened acting between Taron Egerton and this, I don't even know who the guy was in the office that he's talking to, but it's like they're setting up the story. Maybe it's his partner, but it's like
no, the banker, the financier.
Okay, but like right, because the guy's asking him, he's asking for more money when the guy wants him to pay off on the money that got forwarded. It's just, I mean, again, I don't think there was anything. It's like I don't think the tone was gelling. It almost needed to be more like, not to mention a name again and again, but it almost needed to have more of a Wes Anderson eye or a Coen Brothers eye or something for how those scenes would be played out, because they were sort of cartoonish almost. But the I don't know, there was just something stylistically that wasn't quite clicking for me. And I also think it is an insanely complicated back and forth about who's got the arcade rights, who's got the worldwide rights, who's lying about having the rights, who's telling the truth about having the rights. It gets to the point where they're fighting for these documents that I'm like, well, there's been so much skullduggery around these documents that why are you trusting that any document is going to be the document that suddenly everyone's going to go by? It's just like, I was losing track of the goal and of like what the feeling of accomplishment was going to be in this movie. And I actually was thought of another movie that's kind of related to Air. I thought of Argo. They really tried to fabricate a sort of ticking clock feeling at the end. And we've heard about how that great ending of Argo was also sort of not the way it really happened. Created for a movie. This one, the Hank Rogers himself said that when they were working on the movie, they brought them in to consult, and that he and the people that were really involved tried to, I guess Alexi, his partner, they tried to inject as much truth into this movie as possible, but he kind of made it sound like they ultimately stepped away going, what can you do? It's a movie. But he feels that they didn't really that they didn't really capture the feel and the truth of what happened. You know, and he said particularly the car chase is something that's completely invented, that nothing like that ever happened. And I guess, I mean, it's like, I can understand the needs of a movie, and I'm not even dinging this movie over much for that, you know, that scene was whatever. It's just that I do have this thing in the back of my mind about anytime something's based on a true story, but it's not really the story. There's a part of me that's like, why, what are you doing? Like, there, because even a heightened silly movie like this, people feel like they saw what happened. I mean, I'm not saying audiences are dumb. I'm just saying, if it's a story that hasn't been told, and you're like, no one's told this story, let's tell that story, but let's not really tell it. There's a part of me that like goes, I get a little glitch in my head. There's a bad line of code for me of like, well, what are we doing here then? If you're not trying to make it as true as it can be. But then again, I get the needs of a movie, and many of the movies, most of the movies we know of that are supposedly based on true events, have been turned into something so different. So, and you know, it's not like I didn't enjoy the intermittent moments during this movie. Like the scene you talked about, Steve, may have been my favorite. The coding scene back at the apartment. And I did find myself like being drawn at times to Taron Egerton's like screen presence. But there was something about him that I never quite, he seemed like a young guy playing a slightly older guy, or like you said, a buff guy playing a slightly more nebbishy guy. And it never quite clicked for me. And I also think this movie kind of fell flat on its face whenever it tried to get into his personal life, which again is the sort of stuff that they kept out of air that made it feel like it was so focused. I think this movie should have had the confidence to realize that when they try to get those heartstrings pulled, it feels a little bit obligatory or disingenuous or something. I don't know. So like, you know, I didn't like dislike or hate this movie, but I did find myself like having to constantly make myself stay interested, because the stakes seemed not just low, but also like confusing. Like, what are they hoping to get out of this meeting? They now want the arcade rights, but someone else has the handheld rights, or, you know, despite the fact that some of the actors do some fun things along the way. Getting to that point, it just kind of left me cold because I wasn't emotionally hooked by it.
What do you think of it overall, Ronald?
The thing that you're talking about is literally what happened to DeSantis in Florida. Like he thought it was one thing, and then in the end, it wound up being something different once he got it. But anyway, I thought it was muddy. It was a muddy movie that probably would have served us better as like a 4-part series, like a 4-part half-an-hour series. That could have been, I kind of think it even would have been good if they would have had like an 8-bit thing with each person, each group,
to explain like what their role is and like what their context is. I think you're right.
And the documents, like literally the rights in their hand, and then every time somebody lost it, and then it would go down to the person that had it, and then it would go back. That would be easier to understand than what this movie was trying to do towards the end. I was so fucking confused at that part. Like, I was like, what? Like, just simplify it. I didn't really think it needed all that. And this is a real big part. Like, the Nintendo thing was super downplayed. Like, I used to test video games, man. Like, Nintendo is stingy. They only want their first party games, right? So here's how stingy they are. How stingy are they? The Switch is the first time that they really opened the market up to third-party games online. Like the marketplace, it's the first time they did it. And think about how long games have existed on Nintendo and how long the internet's existed while it existed. It's for like 20, 25 years. And they never gave third-party companies access to like sell on their system till the Switch. Yeah. So it's like, you know, they downplayed the shit out of that. And I know that like it's just like blurb in the little story that they're telling, but it's huge. It's huge what they did with Nintendo. It's huge that was used as a way to distribute it. And they just kind of shit on it and gave it like a 5-second blurb at the end when he gave the system to the guy at the end, and with the ticket, the changes. Like I get all that, but like he must have been that convinces me that he must have been an incredible, like, charismatic person to convince these people to do that. And it was just kind of handled like he was just like, oh yeah, well, you've made exceptions. He's like, oh, pretty funny that you knew that was a thing.
Well, I mean,
And it's
Steve, you were mentioning how good Matt Damon was in that role, basically
Yeah.
in Air,
Yeah.
of the guy who's running around trying to keep the deal together that hasn't even gotten started, and he didn't even really have. I mean, it's a very similar but different thing where it's like there isn't really a deal. This guy's
Yeah.
trying to make something happen and keep parties fluid around him so that he can get this thing going. I just never felt like I hooked into what we were supposed to think of Taron Egerton. I knew what we were supposed to think of Matt Damon. I knew there were scenes where we were supposed to see that he does have this gift of like convincing people and bringing them on and reading people, you know, and it comes through in a couple key moments. But I didn't feel like Taron Egerton's character, outside of, again, I think he did a fine job. I didn't think that the movie gave him many scenes where he really hooked me. What I think that his best moments were more the moments where he was kind of like, wait, what the hell's going on here? Where does he keep running off to? I thought he did a good job with that stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I think that one other thing this movie did too, that you mentioned the kind of importance of like Tetris. I do think that when it gets to the end, maybe I had just seen Air, but when it gets to the end, I was like, yeah, Tetris, that's impressive, but those aren't Air Jordan numbers that you're putting up at the end.
Right.
like lifetime downloads or something. I don't know. It was something in the millions, but
Yeah.
I was like, if those were Air Jordans, if Tetris was Air Jordans, it would have been 4 billion downloads. No, but I did think, like, I never thought about why the music in Tetris is this vaguely Russian sort of boat song it never had occurred to me why that imagery was part of the iconography of the game. But no, I mean, I think this is more of a, back to our old scale. This is a wait for it for me, but it's on streaming, so you don't really have to wait for it.
Yeah, you don't have to wait.
Don't prioritize it over other things you might watch instead. But if you're curious about it, I would say, yeah, watch it and satisfy your curiosity. But I find it kind of be tonally muddy is a great word, Ronald.
So muddy. So what have you guys been watching? You guys watch anything since we last recorded that you want to talk about?
Swarm?
Yeah.
I watched Swarm yet.
Yeah.
No. How was that?
What do you think, Ronald?
Clusterfuck. That show was a clusterfuck.
But I mean, like, it doesn't seem like
well acted.
Yeah, it's a very
well acted clusterfuck. Was I supposed to sympathize with this character?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, I think you were. I think you are, but I think you're supposed to see their humanity, maybe, but not sympathize with them.
Yeah, I think that it feels like the problem is it feels like, Steve, what was the season that people didn't really like?
I was going to say this. Take one of those weird episodes of Atlanta that had none of the characters in it, and then blow it up into 7 episodes.
Yeah,
and then give one of those episodes over to its own version of one of those weird Atlanta episodes that is separate from the tone of the show.
A box, man. It gets weird. But
I've heard people talk about that episode, Ronald, episode 6, and miss what was happening there. Like, I think what was happening there was actually kind of interesting. And what they did with that episode was actually kind of interesting in a meta sense, but I didn't think that they nailed the tone of like a true crime show as much as they did all. Because you don't focus on a character the way they focused on that investigator. But I do think that was an interesting angle to take. But no, I think you might be right, Ronald. Throughout the show, every episode had a scene or scenes that were really well done. It had that kind of Donald Glover, the House of Glover sort of feel of like well photographed, interesting, intentional decisions that are really interesting. But then it was sort of like, I don't know, there was something vaguely dissatisfying about it when it got to the 100%.
To the end. There's a version of this that I would have been so for, like a black woman, like who's a serial killer,
but also commenting on the whole beehive sort of
the beehive. The culture
was good, like toxic fandom. Showing somebody murdering people because they like tweeted something nasty about this Beyonce stand-in character.
Yeah, it just felt like it was like not good enough in that way. But it was shot on film and looks unreal at certain scenes. But Dominic Fishback is a force in this, man. But
who's the woman that co-created it and wrote a lot of it?
Oh yeah, she was a writer in Atlanta.
She was. I mean, people keep talking about it, and myself included, as a Donald Glover project, but it has her involvement just as much, if not more. But you're right, Ronald. There is something kind of exciting about the notion of just, a black woman serial killer. You don't really see that much in life or in fiction.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing to take on. And I actually do think that some of the stuff they do with the toxic fandom stuff is like, it's well
Really?
observed.
Yeah. Hell yeah, man.
But I don't know quite what it amounted to. I think that's a big problem. And I've seen other people have that problem with this. It's like, you don't mind being put through this sort of unpleasant show if you feel like it got you somewhere, but it didn't really feel like it got to a real clear place at the end. But
yeah, for sure.
You know,
it's worth checking out though.
Yeah,
definitely worth checking out.
Like half-hour episodes, so it's really not too demanding on your time.
Right.
I wanted to mention a documentary that I watched. It's on video on demand. It's called I Got a Monster.
Oh.
We talked about the show earlier or last year, I guess, the We Own the City HBO series with John Barenthal.
Yeah.
That was out basically just about the gun trace task force in Baltimore City here where we live, and just how corrupt they were and all the damage they did to the citizens of Baltimore and to the police force and to the city in general. But this is basically, if you didn't watch that show and you want to kind of get an idea of what that story is about in a really well made doc, this is the option that I would probably put you on to. I think this is a great documentary, just kind of an overview of what it was, what happened, what went wrong, and the impact that it had on the city. And it's interesting because it kind of takes as kind of like the guide through this doc is one of the lawyers, one of the prosecutors, for a lot of the victims of the task force, and specifically, what was his name? Oh man, Ivan Bates is the lawyer that kind of tells this story or kind of guides through the story. But Wayne, I can't remember his last name, the character that John Barenthal plays in We Own the City, the kind of ringleader of the whole thing. It's just a crazy story, man, and it's crazy that it happened here, and it's probably still some ripples of it happening, which is sad. But this is available on video on demand. If you watched We Own the City and you liked it as much as I did, and just kind of want more information on it, from some of the prosecutors, some of the people involved in it, and that kind of were there. This is a big recommend from me. And if you've never seen that series but just kind of want to learn about it, or if it sounds interesting, it's a big recommend. It's called I Got a Monster, which apparently the title of the movie comes from a line that Wayne would say when he'd call up his people that were in on these crimes with him, when they would basically come upon a drug dealer or somebody they were arresting, that they were going to then rob behind the scenes, in their car, in their home, in their person, whatever. He would basically call these people in and he would basically like, I got a monster. And that's when they knew it was like a big deal, and they would then like all hands on deck to do the crimes that they did, that hopefully they'll be in jail for a long time for. Do
you think it ever got confusing because he had just bought an energy drink and he called to tell him?
It could have been. I mean, the timing was probably pretty good for the peak of Monster Energy, but
he seems like a monster sort of guy. Like I could see him,
Oh, I'm sure. And yeah, Barenthal is incredible in that series, as this character. But somebody posted this on Twitter. I didn't even know this movie existed, but
no, I'm curious about it.
It was really, really good. And yeah, a nice companion piece to the show.
I mean, I might honestly like a drier, more linear version of that, honestly, because I feel like the show jumped around in the timeline so much that I felt like it was hard to get a purchase. But
right. Yeah, no. So that's really the only thing I really watched this past week. But Ronald, was there anything else that either of you guys wanted to mention?
Nothing else for me.
All right. Movieshmovie.com is the website. Pod.link/movie is maybe a better website that you might want to go to if you want to listen to episodes or find links to subscribe to the podcast on a audio platform of your choice, and youtube.com/movie-schmovie-pod. Right, Ronald?
Movie Schmovie podcast.
Okay, I was getting too long, but
I couldn't tell if he was paying attention to you, Steve. I didn't know if he was going to.
Yeah, I was like, you confused me for a second.
Yeah, I know. I wasn't trying to. Sorry, but yeah, just if you want to watch the video elements that we put together that Ronald kind of cuts together, you can find them on YouTube. But if you subscribe to the podcast anywhere, whether it's there or on a podcast platform, if you can leave a review or a star rating, or if there's an option to share it with someone that you think might enjoy the show, we'd really appreciate anything that you might be able to do like that. And if you want to listen along next week, Ronald's pick for required viewing once again, it's called Pathaan.
Yep.
It's on Amazon Prime. You can watch that this week with us and hear us talk about it next week. And then I don't know what's planned for next week. Are we recording next week, John? Are you going to be around? What's the plan?
There is still a chance, because it's our spring break, and there's a chance that there's a last minute thing that might happen. So probably not going to be out of town, but there's still a chance that something might happen.
So we may or may not be back next week. Right. Likely that we will, but if not, it'll be the week after that. And we'll be talking about some other new releases. But again, hit up that Amazon Prime if you want to do the required viewing with us. If you guys are good, I'm good. We'll check you out next week or maybe the week after.
Yes,
it'll be a surprise.
Good to keep them guessing.
but as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.